Billionaire Harasses Waitress. Her shocking response will haunt you at 3 a.m. It was a night like any other at the little diner, a small, unassuming place tucked away in a corner of downtown. But tonight, the atmosphere was electric, thick with tension. The bright neon sign flickered menacingly, casting a ghostly glow on the greasy linoleum floor. Patrons swapped uneasy glances as whispers danced through the air, and the ticking clock sounded more like a countdown to disaster. Suddenly, the door swung open with a horrifying creak, and in strutted Gerald Hargrove, the billionaire notorious for scandals and shady dealings. Dressed in a tailored suit that screamed arrogance, he oozed an unsettling charm that set everyone on edge. As he surveyed the room, his gaze landed on Sarah, a waitress with kind eyes and a warm smile, pouring coffee at a nearby table. She had no idea that her night was about to take a sinister turn. Hargrove approached, a smirk crawling across his face. "What's a pretty girl like you doing in a place like this?" he drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. Eyes widened. Murmurs rippled through the diner. Had he really just? Sarah froze, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. She tried to brush it off with a laugh, but the chill that ran down her spine was undeniable. Hargrove leaned closer, invading her personal space, his breath hot against her ear. "Why don't you join me at my table?" The audacity. The humiliation. Suddenly, Sarah felt a surge of indignation. Maybe she was just a waitress, but she had a backbone. As the crowded diner watched in horror, she straightened up, her hands trembling just slightly. "I'd rather serve drinks to the rats than sit with you," she retorted, her voice steady yet laced with an unexpected fierceness. Gasps erupted, the crowd enraptured in disbelief. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." The tension crackled like a thunderstorm as the room held its breath. Hargrove's face twisted in rage, his hands tightening into fists. "You'll regret that," he hissed, eyes darkening. But Sarah stood her ground, an ember of courage blazing within her. Who knew where this boldness would take her? Just then, a crash shattered the oppressive silence. Hargrove's glass flew from the table, shattering against the wall, stark against the otherwise mundane diner scene. A chilling silence enveloped the room, and then chaos erupted. Could Sarah's defiance ignite a wildfire, or would it just burn her? What would happen next? Would the billionaire unleash his wrath, or could Sarah find the strength to face him head-on? One thing was certain: this night was far from over, and what unfolded next would change everything. Chaos erupted in the little diner as the sound of shattered glass echoed like gunfire. Eyes darted from Gerald Hargrove to Sarah, who was still standing her ground, defiance flickering in her eyes amidst the thick air charged with hostility. The other diners, who had been paralyzed by their shock, began to murmur. The reality of the situation gripped them. It was no longer a simple confrontation, it was a standoff with consequences looming on the horizon. "Get out," Sarah said, her voice steady but tinged with an urgency that seemed to pierce through the electric atmosphere. She felt the weight of countless gazes on her, each one a mix of fear, admiration, and disbelief. Hargrove, stormy and furious, remained where he stood, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. "You think you can talk to me like that?" he spat, his usual smooth demeanor fracturing under the pressure of his rising fury. "Do you know who I am?" The collective tension in the diner snapped like a taut string. People shifted uneasily in their seats as they braced for the inevitable clash. Sarah could feel the heat of Hargrove's rage emanating from him like an oppressive wave. She sensed the danger, but one question rang out louder in her mind than the others filling the diner: what was more terrifying, the challenge of facing Hargrove or the thought of backing down? In that moment, Sarah took a step closer to him, grounding herself firmly. "Yeah, I know who you are. You're just a man who thinks money can buy everything, she said, her voice echoing with sudden clarity. The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. But it can't buy respect. The tension reached a crescendo. Hargrove's lips curled into a sinister smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. They burned like coals, filled with malice and a danger that made chills creep down Sarah's spine. He leaned slightly closer, their faces inches apart, and whispered softly, "You're playing a dangerous game, sweetheart. I always win." As his threat lingered in the air, the diner seemed to shrink around them, the outside world fading into a dull hum. Sarah's heart raced. She needed to think fast. A waitress in her position didn't typically have a fighting chance against a billionaire with a reputation like his, but this was her moment to stand strong. The eyes of her co-workers, her regulars, and the strangers around her demanded resolution. Then, as if summoned by a whispered prayer, the diner door swung open dramatically. A high-profile local reporter, Robin Paxton, rushed in, her camera crew just behind her. "What is going on here?" she demanded, her presence instantly shifting the atmosphere. People knew Robin. She had a knack for stirring the pot and unveiling the truth, and her sudden appearance offered a fleeting glimmer of hope. "Nothing you need to concern yourself with, Robin," Hargrove said, adjusting his suit, a charade of unbothered confidence coating his voice. But Sarah could see the flicker of fear stirring in his eyes. "Really? Because it looks like something worth reporting," Robin said, eyeing the room filled with anxious patrons. The tension ebbed, if only slightly, as the weight of her authority intertwined with the fear Hargrove exuded. This could be Sarah's moment to finally turn the tide against him, but before she could formulate her next words, Hargrove let out a chilling laugh. "You think you can expose me? You have no idea what you're up against," he sneered, turning back to Sarah, whose heart sank at the darkness swirling into the atmosphere once more. "Your money doesn't intimidate me," she replied, trying to hold her ground. The stakes were rising, and she was teetering on a razor's edge. She had defied him, but at what cost? Suddenly, a loud crash came from behind the news crew's equipment had toppled over, drawing everyone's attention away momentarily. Sarah seized the moment. "They need to hear the truth about you, Gerald. It's time for you to be held accountable." But would her bravery cost her everything? As Hargrove's expression hardened, Sarah steeled herself against the impending storm, knowing that she was now at the center of a spiraling conflict. Would this night end with her vanquished or victorious? The true battle was only just beginning, and both sides were bracing for the fight of their lives. The atmosphere in the diner crackled with tension. Faces were pale, hearts racing, and the low murmur of voices gave way to a spine-tingling silence. Sarah's breath came in quick bursts as she locked her eyes on Hargrove, whose menacing demeanor seemed to swell, filling the empty spaces around them. "Are you really going to let this girl?" he began, but Robin cut him off, her voice firm and unwavering. "Gerald, I would tread lightly if I were you," the reporter warned, stepping further inside the diner, her camera crew capturing every moment. "Making threats in front of witnesses isn't smart, especially not with my cameras rolling." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Hargrove's face, but it was quickly masked by arrogance. "You think you hold power here? The only thing you'll capture is my lawyer's business card when this is all over," he shot back, the jeering tone only deepened the resolve within Sarah. She was going to back down. "Not now. Do you think your money will scare me? You're just a bully hiding behind a bank account." Her voice rang out, filled with an intensity she didn't know she could muster. Some patrons whispered encouragement, while others cast wary glances. A second chance, people seemed to sense. Sarah could feel her fingers trembling, but she squared her shoulders, defiance bleeding into determination. Robin stepped closer to Sarah, face serious. "Let us show the world who you are, Gerald. You might not care about what people think, but your reputation has cracked wide open. Don't you want to fix it?" At the mention of reputation, Hargrove's face shifted. "Reputation," he scoffed, "is just a facade. I can buy another one tomorrow if I want." Yet beneath his bravado, a flicker of fear ignited, but before they could delve deeper, a voice from the back called out. "We know who you are, Hargrove. This isn't just your playground." A brave diner, emboldened by Sarah's stand, had stepped forward. The murmurs grew louder with more patrons joining in. "Get out, Hargrove!" someone shouted. Suddenly, the weight of the room shifted. Hargrove could feel his power dwindling like a flame about to be snuffed out. He glanced around, eyes flaring with anger. "You think this is a game? I could end all of you with a snap of my fingers. Or you could leave before we expose your mud," came another voice from a booth nearby. A powerful whisper of rebellion swept through the diner, catching fire quickly among the patrons. "Maybe it's you who needs to leave," Sarah pressed, standing taller. "You may have the money, but you don't own us. You are nothing without your cash and control." Hargrove's hands clenched tighter, veins pulsing in his temples. He paused, as if gathering his thoughts, assessing his impending options. "Enjoy your little moment, Sarah," he hissed, hesitation giving way to menace. "This isn't over. I'll come back for my due." Then like a storm swept away by a gust of wind, he stormed out, pushing past Robin and her crew. The clang of the door echoed as it slammed behind him, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. The transition from chaos to relief was intoxicating. A wave of applause broke out, people standing up, clapping for Sarah while murmurs of disbelief and admiration swirled around the diner. But Sarah knew this battle was far from won. "Did you see that?" Robin gasped, eyes shining with excitement. "You were incredible." "Thanks," but Sarah felt her chest tighten again, that knot of unresolved tension still coiling within as she glanced around the diner, aware of the danger that lingered. "I've opened a door I can't close." "Truth often brings light, and sometimes darkness follows," Robin replied, her expression sobering as she set down her camera, sensing the weight of reality. "Hargrove won't take this lightly." But Sarah couldn't think about that now. She needed to focus on the thrill of the moment, the taste of victory. Yet deep down, a dread settled over her, reminding her that she had painted a target on her back. As the diner buzzed with chatter, Sarah couldn't shake the pressure rising against her chest. What kind of repercussions awaited her? The fight was on, but a chilling question loomed: would Hargrove strike back when she least expected it? The diner had transformed. Where there had been fear, now there was adrenaline. But even as applause echoed around her, Sarah's heart still fluttered with anxiety. The clamor of approval felt hollow against the backdrop of Hargrove's ominous threat. "Sarah, are you okay?" Robin asked, stepping closer, her camera suspended like an anchor between them. "You really stood up to him." I'm just worried," Sarah said, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting Hargrove to waltz back through the door, all power-hungry fury. "What did I just do?" "You took a stand. And you did it beautifully," Robin encouraged, but Sarah could barely respond. She could almost feel the cold fingers of dread pinching at her neck. A low hum of chat filled the air, people recounting the confrontation, but Sarah was lost in her thoughts. She sparked something. Words were air and promised liberation, yet they drew shadows hanging close, too close. Suddenly, the door swung open again, and the chill that swept in was palpable. Sarah's stomach dropped. Her pulse quickened. Hargrove stood there, framed in the doorway like a dark cloud, a stark contrast to the bright din inside. "What now?" Sarah breathed. He sauntered back in, calm and composed, a striking smile planted on his face. "Sorry to disrupt," he called out, letting the door close behind him like a guillotine. "Just wanted to remind everyone here this little show doesn't end without a cost. It's over, Gerald. You can't intimidate us anymore," one diner shot back, his voice shaky but determined. "Is that so?" Hargrove's gaze swept over the room, piercing and cold. "Everyone's so eager for change, aren't they? Change for the better, maybe. Well, let's just say I'm a man of opportunity. And I always collect what's owed." A shudder ran through the room, a ripple of fear laced with disbelief. Whispered doubts festered in the faces of the patrons. Murmurs of support shifted towards worry. Hargrove thrived on this. The tension coiled like a spring, ready to snap. "Leave, Hargrove. Nobody here wants your kind," Robin yelled, but her voice wavered slightly as she stood firm next to Sarah. "Oh, I don't think you fully grasp the power dynamics at play, Robin," he replied, tilting his head with a mocking smile. "I provide the right people the means to thrive. You should be thanking me for the chance." "Thank you for what?" "For scaring us." Sarah's voice cut through, laced with a strength she didn't feel. "You can't buy people's silence. You can't buy their fear." "Fear is a fine motivator," he said, his eyes narrowing. "But it's not the only currency in this world. Know this, Sarah, what you've unleashed isn't just a fight against me. You think you can handle the storm that follows?" His words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, feeding the doubt that slithered in. She wanted to yell, "Bring it on." But it felt like stepping onto thin ice with no way back. Suddenly, a crash echoed against the wall behind them. A plate had slipped from a table, shattering on the floor. Gasps erupted, panic sparking anew. Hargrove chuckled, a chilling sound that scraped against exposed nerves. Then he turned, strolling toward the exit, but not before tossing one last taunt over his shoulder. "You might want to watch what you wish for, Sarah. The bigger they are." The door swung closed behind him, leaving an eerie silence that swallowed the room. Fear coursed through Sarah like ice water, freezing her resolve. "What does he mean? What's next?" She whispered, grappling with the sinking feeling that miscalculated boldness had unveiled a nightmare she had not anticipated. Robin's face was a mask of determination, but even she seemed unsure. "We'll deal with it together. We have to." But the doubt clung to Sarah like a shroud. She had stood up for herself, but in doing so, had she beckoned danger into her life? The exhilaration from moments before was fading, replaced by dread, and yet, as whispers spread like wildfire and determination sparked once more among the diners, one thought overtook Sarah. The battle had been joined. But would Hargrove retaliate in ways no one could foresee? The calm before the storm thickened around them, as they braced for what loomed ahead. The air hung heavy with uncertainty as Sarah gazed around the diner. Faces were stricken with a mix of fear and defiance, and tension buzzed like an electric current. She thought she had ignited hope, but now it felt like a fuse burning dangerously close to the powder keg of Hargrove's wrath. "Do you think he'll come back?" Someone nervously whispered from a corner booth, their eyes wide and shimmering with unshed tears. The question lingered like an uninvited ghost, wrapping around Sarah's chest, tightening with each passing second. "No," Sarah replied too quickly, hoping to sound more certain than she felt. We showed him we're not afraid." But as she said it, she could feel doubt curling in the pit of her stomach. Robin stepped closer, searching Sarah's eyes. "We've got to prepare for a response. He seems unpredictable." A chorus of agreement surged around them. Some diner patrons started gathering at the counter, hands clasped together like knights plotting their next move. There was a steely resolve in their voices, but unease flickered beneath the surface. "What do we do?" someone asked, glancing nervously toward the door, half expecting Hargrove to storm back in. "Stay together," Robin said, her tone firm. "We can watch each other's backs. If he's coming for us, we fight as a team." A murmur of determination spread, but Sarah could see the fear reflected in their eyes. They were all aware of Hargrove's power, his influence stretching far beyond their small town. "I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The last thing she wanted was for anyone to suffer. Her heart raced with the thought of what Hargrove could do. "Hey," Robin said, taking her hand tightly. "You did what was right. You stood up for all of us. We just need to brace ourselves for whatever comes next." Before Sarah could respond, a familiar figure stepped through the door. It was Charlie, the local mechanic, known for his easy smile and even easier nature. But today, that smile was gone. His brow was furrowed, his voice low yet intense. "Did you hear?" A collective hush swept through the room. "Hear what?" Sarah pressed, worry creeping back in. "Hargrove, he's been making calls. About us." "About you," he said, scanning the room as if Hargrove himself might materialize out of thin air. "What do you mean?" Robin asked, gripping Sarah's hand tighter. "He's speaking to the mayor, spreading rumors. He wants to make sure nobody supports you. He's planning to make an example of you." Charlie's voice trembled slightly, the realization hit Sarah like a bucket of ice water. Hargrove's threat was real, and it injected a fresh wave of terror through the diner. Sarah felt it settle ominously in her bones. "Why is he doing this?" someone asked, disbelief lacing their question. "Because he's a bully," Charlie replied. "And bullies always strike where it hurts. He's not just going to let this slide." A new wave of tension rolled in, pressing against Sarah until she could hardly breathe. What if it works? What if he destroys everything? "Then we expose him," Robin announced, her eyes fierce. "If he's coming after Sarah, then we'll dig into his past. We'll find something that can stop him." In that moment, Sarah realized that this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone, those who believed in healing the fractures in their community. The adrenaline surged again, intertwining with her fear. "I'm in," Sarah declared, her voice stronger than before. "Whatever it takes. We stand together." Murmurs of agreement echoed throughout the diner, growing into a unified resolve. But as the fire ignited, something shifted. A siren shrilled from outside, slicing through their determination. They all turned to the window, heartbeats racing, dread pooling in the pit of their stomachs. "Please, don't let it be," Sarah breathed, but a black SUV rolled to a halt right out front, windows tinted dark. The door swung open, and figures stepped out, shadows creeping toward the diner. Hargrove's threat was no longer distant, it was here. "Get ready," Charlie whispered, but Sarah could feel the wheels of fate spinning too fast. How would they confront the monstrous aftermath of their courageous stand? What forces were about to unfold in this high-stakes game? As the door to the diner opened once more, the air grew thick with tension. The door creaked open, and the fluorescent lights flickered momentarily, casting an eerie glow over the scene. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat as she recognized the approaching figures. Hargrove's henchmen, dangerous and intent on delivering a chilling message, moved with an unsettling confidence. Charlie stepped in front of Sarah, his body tense as a coiled spring. "We can't let them intimidate us," he muttered, though uncertainty lingered in the air. Robin turned to Sarah, her eyes wide and steady despite the chaos unfolding. "Stick together. Don't let them divide us." The diner's atmosphere shifted, fear rippled through the crowd like an electric shock. Conversation stopped, eyes darted nervously, and the clinking of cutlery fell silent. Hargrove's goons approached the counter, their expressions unreadable. One, a burly man with a jagged scar slicing across his cheek, fixed his gaze on Sarah. "You," he said, his voice a low growl. "Hargrove wants a word." The room collectively gasped, and a wave of anxiety crashed over Sarah, overtaking her previous resolve. "What does he want?" she blurted, her voice shaky despite her efforts to sound brave. "Just a little chat. Nothing you should be afraid of, yet," the man smirked, a cruel glint in his eyes. Charlie and Robin stepped closer, forming a protective barrier around Sarah. "We're not going anywhere with you," Charlie said, his voice edged with confrontation. "Is that so?" The scarred man chuckled, eyeing the group with a predatory stare. "You might want to reconsider. Hargrove has ways of making people cooperate." An invisible weight settled heavily on Sarah's chest. She remembered the stories whispered in town about Hargrove's power, but she also knew the strength swelling inside her community. "We're not afraid of him," Robin said defiantly, her voice sliced through the tension like a knife. "You tell Hargrove he can't bully us anymore." The goons exchanged furtive glances, and for a heartbeat, Sarah thought they might back down. But the scarred man just shook his head. "You don't even understand what you're dealing with. Hargrove won't stop until he gets what he wants." "Then I guess we'll fight," Sarah shouted, her voice rising above the gathering dread. "You can't take that away from us." It was as if someone had thrown a switch. The henchman lunged forward, and panic erupted. Chairs toppled, screams pierced the air, and Sarah felt her heart thundering in her ears. Robin shouted for everyone to scatter, but before Sarah could react, arms grabbed her, yanking her away from her friends. Time slowed as she looked back at Charlie and Robin, fear etched on their faces. "Let her go!" Charlie shouted, his fists clenched. Too late. The scarred man spat, dragging Sarah toward the door. A surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins. This was no longer just about her safety. Hargrove had crossed a line, and now they had to fight. Just as they reached the door, Sarah wriggled free, stunning him long enough to shout, "We're not afraid of you or Hargrove. You're not our boss." But as she turned to run back into the diner, the second henchman blocked her path, a smirk twisting his lips. "You really think you can run from this? Hargrove won't let you go. You're trapped." The words hit Sarah like a cold slap of water. Despair clutched at her throat. But just then, a siren wailed from a distance, cutting through the air like a lifeline. "Police!" Someone whispered in shock, the henchmen exchanged fearful looks, and the scarred man hesitated. "This isn't over," he hissed before retreating. As relief washed over Sarah, she felt the weight of the moment hang heavy in her chest. This battle was far from won. "Together," she said, locking eyes with Charlie and Robin. "We stand together." But would they be enough to withstand Hargrove's retaliation? Shadows lengthened as the threat of his revenge loomed closer, darker, more menacing than ever. With hearts racing, they braced themselves for the storm to come. As silence swelled in the diner, Sarah's heart raced with a mix of adrenaline and anxiety. The shadow of Hargrove loomed over her like a dark cloud, and the aftermath of the henchman's exit did little to calm her turmoil. She locked eyes with Charlie and Robin, their shared tension spoke volumes. Did they really just leave? Robin whispered, a hint of disbelief in her voice. The trembling in her hands gave away her inner storm. "I can't believe Hargrove thinks he can just walk in here and demand anything," Charlie said, attempting to keep the flames of courage alive. "We need to figure out a plan. He can't get away with this." The diner's atmosphere was slowly returning to normal, but the air was thick with unease. Patrons exchanged worried glances as they processed what had just unfolded, their once normal lives disrupted by Hargrove's cruelty. What if he sends them back? Sarah's voice trembled. "We need to be prepared for anything." "We can't hide," Robin replied, determination igniting her expression. "We need to confront him. Together." Just then, the sharp clunk of the diner's door swung open again, and all heads turned in alarm. A figure stepped inside, an elderly woman with a weathered face and fierce, storm-gray eyes. She approached their booth, her footsteps calculated and steady. "Have you kids lost your minds?" she said, her voice gravelly yet alive with authority. Facing Hargrove head-on. "You have courage, but it won't save you if you're careless. You need a different approach." "Who are you?" Sarah asked, bewildered. "I was once like you." "A fighter," the woman replied. "We need to stay one step ahead of that monster. He thrives on fear, and the moment he senses you're frightened, it's game over." "What do you know about him?" Charlie pressed, leaning in with fierce curiosity. The woman hesitated, searching their faces as if evaluating their strength. "I know he is ruthless. He'll crush anyone who stands against him. But I also know that Hargrove has weaknesses. What you need is information, something he doesn't want you to find. Like what? Robin challenged. The leverage you need is buried somewhere deep within his empire. A secret that can take him down. The moment you grasp that, his empire will quake. The words hung in the air like charged lightning, filling Sarah with a flicker of hope. But uncertainty reared its head again. How do we find this secret? There's a woman, the old woman continued, a former associate of Hargrove. She knows where the skeletons are buried. If you act quickly, you might catch her before she vanishes again. The urgency of her message struck a chord. Where can we find her? Charlie asked. She should be working at the old bookstore on 5th. But beware, Hargrove's eyes are everywhere. He can sniff out trouble. As the woman turned to leave, the way she held herself emanated both strength and foreboding. Sarah felt a mix of gratitude and dread. Would they really risk seeking the truth? Would it put more lives in danger, including their own? The door swung shut behind her, and with that, a heavy silence cloaked the diner once more. What do we do? Robin asked, looking between her friends. We gather our courage, Charlie replied, his voice steadying. No more running. We fight back. They shared a determined glance, nodding in unison. With their hearts pounding, they prepared to step into the unknown, a world shadowed by deception and power. But as plans formed, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were only skimming the surface of the storm brewing around them. Just then, Sarah spotted a familiar figure lurking outside the diner's window. A fleeting bolt of dread shot through her, twisting her stomach. Wait, is that one of Hargrove's men? The last flickers of hope began to dim as fear of an impending confrontation set in. Would they be ready to face whatever dark twist lay ahead? The answer was just a breath away, but the storm was far from over. A shiver coursed through Sarah as she squinted through the glass, her breath momentarily hitching. The man outside had his back turned, but she recognized the broad shoulders and the dark coat too well. It's definitely one of his goons. We need to get out of here, she said, urgency leaping from her voice. Charlie and Robin exchanged worried glances. You'd think he'd be done after what just happened, Charlie muttered, jaw clenching. But the intensity in his eyes told a different story. They were far from safe. Let us keep our heads down, Robin suggested, her hands nervously tapping against the table. We can wait and see. But Sarah could feel the heat radiating off the man outside, even from a distance. If he spots us in here, her voice trailed off, worry knotting her stomach. Just then, diners began to watch the figure outside, murmurs rising like a swell of chaotic waves. Who is that? Should we call the police? The sounds of concern layered the space with a fresh tension. We can't wait, Charlie pushed the booth seat back, determination etched into his features. If he's waiting for us to leave, he'll know we're onto something. Panic coursed through Sarah. What if we just leave out the back? We can sneak to the bookstore from there. Charlie nodded. That's our best bet. They slid out of the booth, light on their feet, hearts racing, scanning the diner for anyone who might be watching. The air felt electric, charged with unsaid fears and unacknowledged dreams of escape. They moved swiftly toward the kitchen exit, adrenaline pumping. Just as they reached for the handle, a loud crash erupted from the front of the diner. Glass shattered like sickening crystal rain. The man had smashed through the window, sending patrons shrieking backward. Go! Move! Charlie shouted, his voice piercing through the panic. They bolted into the alley, the cold night air striking their skin. Adrenaline surged as they ran, taking a left down the narrow path that led to 5th Street. Their breaths came in quick gasps, pounding footfalls echoing behind them. Did he see us? Robin gasped, looking over her shoulder. I don't know. Sarah replied, dread pooling in her chest. We have to make it to the bookstore. We can't slow down. The old bookstore loomed ahead, its fading sign barely illuminated in the darkness. Desperation fueled their strides until they staggered to the entrance, pushing through the creaking door and slipping inside. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and dust, a comforting yet eerie haven. They stumbled into the quiet interior, but their relief was short-lived when they heard footsteps behind them. "Did we lose him?" Charlie whispered, his eyes darting around. The dim light barely illuminated the room, shadows dancing around them like phantoms. "Not yet," Sarah breathed, staring through the glass doorway. The street was empty, but she could feel the heavy weight of tension. There was no telling if the man was lying in wait. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows of the bookstore, a woman with wild hair and intense, piercing eyes. "You should not be here," she hissed, raising a finger to her lips. "He's coming for you." Fear twisted in Sarah's gut. "What do you mean?" "We're looking for not now," the woman hissed. "Time runs short. Hargrove has people everywhere." Sarah and her friends shifted uneasily as the reality of their situation engulfed them. Were they too late? Had they walked right into a trap designed months in the making? A low voice echoed from the doorway. "You think you can outrun your fate?" The man stood there, his presence dark and menacing, casting a long shadow across the room. "We need to get out," Robin murmured, panic bleeding into her voice again. "Stay calm," Charlie urged, guarding them as they backed towards the shelves. But with every second that passed, the room felt smaller, the walls closing in a sense of entrapment washed over them. Then the woman stepped forward, her eyes fierce. "Listen closely. If you want to survive this encounter, you must find out what he truly fears." What fear lay beneath Hargrove's facade? Sarah opened her mouth to ask, but the words dissolved into the thick tension. Time was slipping through their fingers, and with it, the last chance to stand against the storm. "Don't let him think he's the hunter. Turn the tables." The woman's voice remained steady, but doubt seeped into every word, and just like that, the silence broke with a thundering crash outside. They all turned to see Hargrove's men storming toward them, each step deafening in the stillness. What was it that Hargrove feared? Sarah felt the walls closing in, just like her heart. Would they figure it out before it was too late? The storm was far from over. Panic rippled through Sarah as she pressed her back against the musty bookshelf, her mind racing. Hargrove's men were in the store, and the woman's warning echoed in her head. Turn the tables. But how? They were outnumbered, cornered like mice in a trap. Over there. One of Hargrove's men shouted, pointing toward the trio huddled in the darkness. Anxiety gnawed at Sarah, her fingers trembling as she searched for something, anything they could use. The woman moved beside her, her presence a fierce anchor amid the chaos. "Follow my lead," the woman urged, her voice low but firm. Without hesitation, she darted toward the back of the store, her wild hair trailing like a beacon. Sarah, Robin, and Charlie exchanged quick glances before rushing in pursuit, adrenaline racing through their veins. The two men advanced, eyes narrowing as they maneuvered through the maze of tall shelves. Charlie squeezed Sarah's arm, urging her to keep moving. They slipped through a narrow aisle just as the men reached the entrance, voices echoing coldly as they ordered the patrons to clear out. "Where are they?" one barked, frustration slicing through his tone. The trio kept their breath quiet, hearts pounding in their chests. "Is the back door locked?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I think so," Robin replied, brow furrowing. But just then, a loud crash sent echoes rattling across the shelves as the men rifled through the books, determined to flush them out. The woman glanced back, eyes sparking with urgency. "We need to create a diversion. Now." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, the woman grabbed a stack of books and hurled them to the floor. The thud reverberated, drawing the men's attention like moths to a flame. "Go. Now." She hissed, they didn't need to be told twice. They bolted for the back of the store, pushing through the door, which thankfully creaked open. As they stepped outside, the moist air hit them, grounding their racing thoughts just long enough to regain focus. Which way? Charlie asked, eyes darting. Let us head toward the alley, Robin urged, already moving through the shadows. But before they could take more than a few steps, gunshots rang out in the night, sending shards of terror through them like ice-cold daggers. They ducked behind a dumpster, the stench overwhelming but necessitated by the immediacy of their escape. What the hell was that? Sarah gasped, her heart racing harder than ever. They're trying to take us out. Charlie shouted, voice strained. He pulled out his phone, but as he tried to dial for help, he looked up, fear washing over his face. There's no service. Stay low, the woman said, scanning the street. She eyed the road where the sounds echoed. If we move quickly, we can slip through before they realize we're out here. But what if Hargrove is out there too? Sarah asked, every instinct screaming caution. Each second stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. The woman hesitated, flicking her intense gaze toward Sarah. That's exactly what he wants you to think. He capitalizes on fear, but his true weakness is underestimating his opponents. Sarah's stomach churned. How could they possibly outsmart a man like Hargrove? He was rich and powerful, not to mention ruthless. Yet, a flicker of hope sparked inside her. So we fight back. Exactly, the woman said firmly. But we need information. His routine, his secrets, that's where the answer lies. As they crouched silently, the sounds of Hargrove's men searching the area grew closer. Sarah felt a rush of determination. They could be the ones to expose him, to pull back the curtain on his reign of terror. But first, they had to escape. As they edged out from behind the dumpster, shadows flitted along the side of the buildings, and the night air buzzed with unease. Are we ready? Robin whispered, gripping Sarah's arm for support. In 3-2 the woman counted down, her body tense. And then it hit them, a sudden explosion of sound. Hargrove's men charging down the alley, bearing down like a storm. What deeper secrets were they chasing? What would they uncover if they managed to slip from dangerous grasp? The intensity in the air thickened, every second feeling more precarious than the last. Their fate hung in the balance, and somewhere beyond the shadows, the truth awaited. Sarah's heart raced like a wild horse as they huddled behind the dumpster. The six-legged footsteps of Hargrove's men echoed like thunder in the narrow alleyway. We have to get past them, Sarah whispered, glancing back at Charlie and Robin, her resolve anchoring them. We'll create a distraction, the woman said, her voice fierce yet calm. Robin, slip around the left, and when I say go, toss something to lure them away. We'll take it from there. You mean it? Robin asked, eyes wide. This is no game. Stay sharp. The woman's gaze pierced the darkness, scanning for any sign of movement. Sarah felt a tingling anticipation. This was their chance. As the shadows loomed closer, the woman whispered, now. They sprang into action. Robin darted to the left while the woman grabbed an old metal trash can and tipped it over, sending clattering chaos into the air. Over here. The scarred man shouted, veering toward the noise. Go, go. Sarah cried, feeling adrenaline surge, propelling her forward as Charlie followed closely behind. They sprinted down the alley, hearts pounding like war drums. The night air filled with the smell of wet pavement, sending them racing through darkened streets that twisted and turned like a maze. Which way to the bookstore? Charlie panted, glancing at the shadows flitting behind them. Just keep running. Sarah yelled, determination fueling her feet. She could almost feel the weight of Hargrove's wrath pressing against her back, yet the fear morphed into courage. She could fight against the currents of dread dragging her down. They burst onto 5th Street and skidded to a halt in front of the old bookstore. The lights were dim, shadows casting ominous shapes inside. Does anyone even know if she is still here? Sarah asked, breathless, hope flickering uncertainly. Let's check inside, the woman urged, eyes sharp. Nodding, Sarah pushed the door open with trembling hands. It creaked ominously, but they slipped inside, quickly scanning the interior. There she was, an elderly lady at the counter, her weathered face etched with lines of wisdom and worry. "What do you need?" she asked, her voice gravelly but urgent. "Hargrove's coming for us. He wants to silence the truth," Sarah blurted, desperate. "Do you have anything we can use against him?" The woman's eyes caught the light, glimmering. "Hargrove is not invincible. His empire has weak points, but you must be clever. We can leverage his past dealings against him." As Sarah listened intently, the older woman leaned closer, urgency thick in the air. "There's a file hidden in the old office behind the bookstore, a ledger that details all of his underhanded tactics. If you can retrieve it, you'll expose him." "Where? How do we get in?" Robin pressed, a new fire lighting within her. "Through the back stairs, but hurry. You don't have much time." The trio darted to the back of the bookstore, hearts racing, adrenaline buzzing as they climbed the creaking stairs. "This could end everything for us," Charlie muttered, glancing back warily. "Maybe, but it's now or never," Sarah insisted, pushing through the door to the dusty office. That it was damp and dark, a stark contrast to the light of their determination. The shelves were lined with forgotten volumes, but Sarah's eyes were locked onto an ancient filing cabinet tucked into the corner. She pulled it open, the rusted hinges screaming in protest. "I don't see anything." "Dig deeper," the woman urged, heart racing. With trembling fingers, Sarah rifled through old papers, anxious breaths escaping her lips like whispers of hope. Then, there it was, a worn ledger, tattered at the edges, bearing Hargrove's name. "Found it," she gasped, adrenaline surging. Just then, a heavy thud echoed from the staircase. "They're here," Robin gasped. "Go. Let us move." The woman yanked the ledger from Sarah's grasp, her face radiant with fierce determination. "We confront him now." As they rushed down the stairs, the reality of what they were embarking on settled heavily upon them. But there was no turning back. They burst outside, into the moonlit street, where the air felt electric, the world hanging in the balance. Suddenly, lights flickered across their path, illuminating Hargrove's men, their faces taut with determination. "There they are!" one yelled, the chase reigniting. But Sarah didn't look back. "We fight together," she shouted, bolstering her friends as they dashed forward, the ledger safely tucked under the woman's arm. The confrontation was fast approaching, but hope surged in Sarah's chest. The truth would be their weapon, and together, they'd unveil the darkness that Hargrove had hidden in the shadows. "Stay close," the woman shouted, and they pushed through the chaos, hearts pounding a fierce rhythm of rebellion. As Hargrove's darkness loomed ever closer, Sarah felt a flicker of faith. Maybe they could win. Maybe this was their chance to take back control. They were not alone. And together, they could stand against the storm. The showdown was upon them. Would they emerge victorious, or would darkness consume them whole? The truth awaited, just a heartbeat away. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Each click counts. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is what keeps these stories alive.